Game developers of Reddit, what is the worst experience you've had while making a game? Was told by boss that we are supposed to create an online simulation game with integrated educational material to gain score points so that users can learn about various financial concepts while playing the game. I was excited, but after tons of modifications requests, it turned out to be video player combined with couple of drag and drop MCQs resulting in automated assets unlock animations giving user no control of simulation. About to submit this in couple of weeks with a P morale. Educational games have a tendency to have very little player agency. Less than 12 hours after the launch of our MMO, it became apparent that we had a problem. Characters skipping so fast it looked like short distance teleporting. Characters being hit and taking damage while no enemies appeared to be around. And a bunch of other really strange desync issues. None of our testers were able to reproduce this, but we could all see it happening on the live servers. We had most of the programming team trying to track this down, working 24/7 on all sorts of theories including networking, cheats, logic errors, bandwidth issues. I found this maybe 24 hours into the search. Turned out one of the oldest and most fundamental parts of our game engine used floating point for time, the time that was propagated to the entire game. This had worked splendidly during dev and testing, because we never kept a single game session going for long enough to accumulate floating point errors. Had the dev originally creating this part changed it to integer base time, pushed out a tiny update, and then we all went home to sleep for 12 hours. Great story with a happy ending. After about 2 months working on a project, my boss comes over and says she needs to move my shared virtual drive to another location. She said she would use a Unix terminal to perform this risky task. I watched her type the wrong command and before I could say anything it was done. She started whispering to herself, "Oh number, oh no, I have deleted your drive. I'm so sorry." She had indeed deleted my entire drive instead of moving it. No version control, no backups, no getting it back, just gone. She said I could take the rest of the day off and start rewriting it all tomorrow. It wouldn't take me that long. How kind. 2 months off work. I went home filled with rage and thought of never coming back. The next day however I went there and started rewriting everything. It wasn't actually that bad. It only took about 10 days and everything was much cleaner the second time. A mental exercise I recommend to every developer out there. It only took about 10 days and everything was much cleaner the second time. Absolutely, whenever I've had to rewrite code, without fail the rewritten version works better and takes a fraction of the time to write. Worst experience I've had that concerns making games is getting started with a team of remote members who all eventually stop working on the project. No commitment, basically. Many years ago I wrote a game for the Commodore PET, a dungeon crawler type game. The PET had a cassette as this was pre-floppy days. I had to heavily optimize the memory usage to fit the game into memory and finish the game with 0 bytes left. Saved it. Apparently it take more memory to load than to save because I could never load the game again. Backups and printout were not a thing yet, so lost forever. It was the best game I had written ever. It was the best game I had written ever. This is not the best game ever written. This is just a tribute. Being too lazy to comment my own code on long-term projects. My coding style has changed quite significantly in the last 2 years I've been working on a mobile game. Having to go back and digging through old code is just not fun. Community college. Was in a class where we had to work on 2 games concurrently, 1 group and 1 individual, because that sounds like a recipe for success. Group slacked so much that the night before both projects were due I just had to say screw it and had to finish all the programming of the game with placeholder assets. I was hardly behind on my work but was waiting on their work to finish things up. Got done at some point in the morning and proceeded to finish my individual project because I was an idiot and slacked on that one. Totally my fault. Got done with both projects at 7 AM. Turned them in at 8 AM. Got 100% on both because my community college had low standards. Lack of patience with myself, leading to game abandonment and forgetting about it until a Reddit thread 15 years later. Now I'm curious. natural artificial behavior for NPCs and enemies. It took me nearly 6 months to stop having I follow scripting protocol and instead react based on the environment and not what X says to do. Every night was miserable, lying awake in bed and thinking about why it wasn't working. But now that I have finally finished it, I'm basically 99% done. 4 years of development in, solo, and about 155 gigabytes later, I can finally start doing music. I did the minor for my school in cooperation with 2 other schools where we were making a game for the Dutch Police Academy that would make it easier and cheaper for them to train the officers with. We were making the game in Unity with 4 developers and 4 artists. Well, one of the artists never pulled changes from the Unity project. For those who don't know, Unity offered, haven't used it in a long time, a build-in JIT feature we used. So when he wanted to commit his changes, we were set back like 4 weeks of progress because it overwrote everything, and we couldn't figure out how to revert it back. We could go back to a previous version, but we couldn't revert his push. We salvaged it somewhat by going back and getting the important scripts and pasting it in the new, wrecked version. But considering the next day was the end of a sprint and we were to show what we had, we weren't happy, and we already didn't really like that artist. It was a project for school, so I don't know if it counts, but I was working with Unity for the first time and my dumb butt decided to transfer files. Half of the game broke. It was 2 AM, and I had to do a presentation of it in the morning. I've made it a personal rule to not work on code past 1 AM or so. It's almost impossible to do any meaningful work when I'm tired. Having great ideas, putting it together and spending around 8 hours making an intro cutscene only to find the character won't turn the right way, getting P that they won't listen, trying to fix it, fixing it and then seeing the fix messed up the rest of the cutscene. I ended up taking a long break, working on it for a bit then giving up. The worst experiences were early on where I didn't have enough experience to finish a concept and then abandoned it. The modern trend of smaller initial games as a way of learning is the right way to go. Worst part for us was dealing with people on Steam purchasing the game because it was cheap and then leaving negative comments because it wasn't a AAA title level of polish. Just make it more expensive. Up until the age of 21 I never knew it was possible to work too hard. Up until then I had been a typical lazy teenager. I worked 14 hours a day for 10 days in a row for a deadline for a games competition, though I honestly found the experience really fun. However, my brain disagreed due to the sheer amount of stress from other aspects of my life at the time, including final year of university. I spent 2 weeks sat in my room playing Halo 5, not really sure why I was feeling so off. At the end of these 2 weeks I got on the London Tube to meet a mentor of mine who was a games developer. On the tube I suddenly realized just how gross people were, and really hated how close and packed in everyone is on the tube. I couldn't breathe and felt utterly terrified at the thought of touching another person. I managed to get out of the underground and catch my breath, but my brain felt scrambled. That was the day that started a 2-year-long process of learning to deal with panic attacks. I'm only just getting past it now, and it rarely gets to the point where I have an actual attack. I've learned to listen to my body now and I never feel guilty for taking naps or staying in bed late. I know it's my body forcing me to relax. The advice my mentor gave me that day, when I met him, was, if you ever feel like you're pushing too far, make a chicken salad, or something. Just do something else and take a break, you're workaholic. Making a simple spell system for an MMO. A guy absolutely insisted against all odds that a certain aspect of a subtype of spells, particle collision with bolt abilities, be done entirely through a script. His unedited script. It was an absolute mess. It was so bad that I struggled to break 90 FPS basic when those abilities were cast, and had to optimize a dozen fairly complex scripts. He definitely made some of them, just to hold 90 plus with this script active, because it was alone was generating spikes of 30 plus FPS loss. How bad was the script? I'm talking massive update calls on high particle counts, recaching other abilities 100 plus times a second, Why? Particle waves checking for every collision possible, including for other abilities from the same source, which can't even be cast simultaneously, when the physics settings prevents most of those collisions from even happening. Carefully lined up color progression via update, to match up with the particle system's color over time component. I'm pretty sure he was actually competent in just trying to make my life a living heck. What last line you got me here. Sometimes there is no other explanation why people do act like what. Pride probably, but your explanation is more likely true also. After a week of working 16-hour days to push out content for a big demonstration for the company owners, they decided that they hated everything we'd spent 2 years doing and wanted almost of it redone. It was portrayed as being all our fault even though they'd offered very little guidance as to what they wanted beyond vague generalizations. Lots of player choice hard sci-fi. It also didn't help that they wanted a tremendous amount of work done very quickly by a too small team, and they wanted it all done impeccably. I was let go shortly after, with the rest of my team following shortly after. I was devastated at the time, but can recognize now that I kind of dodged a bullet not working for them anymore. I taught myself to code from scratch, using Unity. It was a long and painful experience, but I completed my game and chucked it on the Android store. Asked my 300 Facebook friends, at least 100 of which are decent mates, to download it and give it a go, and only about 8 people did that for me. I think there are about 25 people playing at ATM though, so, progress huh? So the worst EXP part, was finding out my mates suck. 8 Facebook friends actually following through with downloading a game and trying it out doesn't seem like a super low number to me. I'm still a student, but one time in my second semester I was super far behind on all my projects because I had 7 classes that semester and every one of them had a huge assignment, all assigned in the same week and due in the same week. We did not get much time to work on these projects. For one of them I thought if I stayed up and never stopped working I could check all the requirements in a day and then hand in something kinda trash, but still acceptable. I stayed up for 40 hours straight and I couldn't even get the core mechanic of my game to work. It probably would have helped if I took a nap at some point, or even just a break for anything longer than using the bathroom or waiting in line for food at the cafeteria, before heading right back upstairs to work while I ate. I was definitely burnt out before I even started and that kind of exhaustion only made it worse. I was working on a game for a new console. It was supposed to be released along the console to promote sales, which caused frankly unreasonable deadlines. Keep in mind I was doing all the heavy work here. Long story short, I had to go several days without sleep to release the game on time, which allowed several glitches to go unnoticed, one of which notably caused the player's brain to explode when attempting to disconnect from the server or loading the game after your character died. I tried to mitigate the damage by hiding the log off button on the interface and convincing players to play carefully until I managed to fix the glitch, but my sleep-deprived brain decided to do this in the worst possible way, causing mass panic and several deaths which I now regret, but at the time convinced me I had to double, triple and quadruple down on my original explanation. Man, freaking Bethesda. Not a game developer but I voice act in indie games, most of which haven't ended up being finished, but I mean, I got my $15 for the hour I put in. The worst one was when I knew I was voicing a dating sim, but the developer said it was really cute, and I liked the screenshots and needed the cash so I said sure. After reading one script of harmless lines, dev sends me a message of hey, could you do another quick script? First thing on the page was essentially my character begging for anal sex. I noped out of there so hard, refunded the guy and told him to delete my voice clips. We worked over Google Drive too so I could delete them there, but he may have downloaded them. I stalk the dev regularly to make sure I don't have to sue him, but it's entirely possible he just had an oddly specific say of trying to get customized audio p. It's perfectly fine to ask for sex lines, but it's not okay to tell this after you have agreed to do some lines. I was at a smallish studio doing work for a larger producer. We did better than what they asked for. They were impressed so they extended the release a whole year so we could bring the project to total fruition. A couple months into the extension, they decided they weren't sure about the direction of the game anymore, so they told us to archive everything and put it on hold indefinitely. I lost my job cause my studio didn't have the funds to keep everyone. Currently working on one as an amateur, been working on it off and on for almost 8 years as a sole developer, using the Unity engine. Still trying to implement basic functions and make sure it all works out with what I'm going for. Working on an atmospheric horror game set in a haunted forest. Good luck to you, mate. I'm the head writer on a project with a similar premise. Forest is not an easy setting. I used to spend hundreds of hours making custom StarCraft Brood War maps. One in particular was sort of my life project and had a scale and complexity to the programming that was unmatched by any other map I'd seen. About 80% through completion I found out why it was unmatched when I attempted to program the shop on the map and learned that there was a maximum number of programmable trigger points built into the map editor. I couldn't swallow the pill of figuring out how to simplify the game while retaining its intended functionality, and ultimately never made another one out of sheer frustration. Worked on an online multiplayer tactical RPG in high school early to mid 2000s. We had created a nice stable client that had 8 characters we worked hard to balance and unit drops that worked off how each player tended to play. If you liked to rush, it would drop more rush type characters. We had a couple hundred players a day and were feeling really proud of it. We were about to push an update with the full set of 36 units when a random user emails us about the security of our servers being poor and to pay him to fix it or he'll scuttle our game. Of course we refused, and the next day we were locked out of the site. The servers were locked up, metadata deleted. We could log into our profiles to play, but it just displayed the 3 creators' real names and then a paintball picture saying HATZORS. 10 minutes before launch of our open beta, dev insisted on updating the chat server. I reluctantly complied and the chief game designer did a quick smoke test by creating a chat group called Penis Town. Turns out that chat server version had a bug that the first group created became the default for everyone. Game launched and everyone went straight to Penis Town. I bet a lot of players got a cheap laugh out of it. Not having the right hardware. The software clearly isn't the problem, since I use Blender, Unity, etc. The essential software, though, my PC is complete garbage. As I have a Windows 7 with god-awful specs, it can barely run a Gamma Cube game. This is a complete pain when it comes to rendering, as well as adding up to my low patience when learning new things. It truly breaks up every piece of sanity in my head, making me just give up on the project. Not as a whole, as I'll still work on concept art, but rather, just the general actual creation itself. But all in all, the awful specs really cancel out my dreams of my future projects, in which I am hoping to have advanced graphics for an indie game, making me upset. But I guess it's best to just build myself up to an upgrade, slowly. Windows 7 is no reason for a slow PC. The death threats really suck, man. Even the largest, evilest companies are full of people that genuinely want to make fun experiences. When something goes wrong, or something we've been working on doesn't quite hit the mark, we're acutely aware of it. That on its own can be tough, but when someone is so devastated and unhinged that they imply, or blatantly say, that they want to come after you or hurt you, the glistening-eyed world-building child inside takes a hit. It really makes you question why you risk it all working in a relatively young, volatile industry. Love your video games and try to extend that love to the people who make them. Not a professional game dev, but I do some free time hobby projects. The worst thing is having a great idea, working on it for a few weeks and getting it almost done but without any of the polishing, then losing all interest in the project and getting a great idea for the next one. This cycle repeats itself until I'll lose all interest in any game dev related stuff for a few months, and then it's all over again. Yep. This is how you end up with so many starts and so few finishes. It's like you spend so long just to invent the building blocks of your game that by the time they're ready, the task of actually building the game with them seems like such a chore, and certainly less attractive than starting over on that new idea you have. Working a freelance job, nice big client, nice big project, would be a boon to the portfolio when finished. One day the client ran out of money and kept blaming the company who was supposed to fund the project. But money was just around the corner, and by this point we had developed a working relationship over a year, so I trusted the guy. Kept working pro bono because he hadn't screwed me over before. I, and several others working on the project, was so naive. Turned out the funding stopped because the client had lied a lot about his experience, scared the other company off, and had absolutely nothing else in waiting. He was just stringing along this freelancing team while pocketing any remaining money, about £100k, left over from before the other company ran. The team was well out of pocket for this butthole, relationships were strained and depression ensued. I don't know what legally happened with the other company and the butthole, but considering the house and car he owns, this isn't the first time he's done stuff like this. That was the day I stopped freelancing and started looking for full-time studio work instead. It's pretty unchallenging, but it allows for me to work on my own projects outside of work without risking burnouts. To this day I see him online trying to sucker new teams into his BS, but I can't do anything because he accused me of harassment shortly after the debacle. And speaking up plays right into that accusation. I just want any developer to steer clear of the initials JW, running a studio with the initials BSS. After a couple weeks of overtime where everyone ate overtime food offered by the company, the bathrooms would be so disgusting that I'd go on another floor to poop. When I was still an intern, me and the other interns were blamed for a missed contract with a major government agency. The idiotic thing was that our demo worked perfectly fine and was greenlit by everyone above us. To this day the boss still hasn't told anyone what was wrong. My suspicion is that the boss doing the presentation fricked up and needed a scapegoat. Of course, the interns being the lowest rank were an easy choice. Relations deteriorated quickly after that and we were kicked out for no apparent reason halfway through. They weren't able to give a clear reason, and now the Ministry of Education has banned them from ever hiring another intern after we reported them. In the end, we believe they just wanted to make easy money in the games industry by hiring some game dev students for an internship, and they failed hard. A mere 5 days before our big expo is on a Tuesday, our fourth teammate just flicks right off the face of the earth even though we have an astronomical amount of work to do to get the game ready for hundreds of random people to play it. Smash cut to Sunday. The three of us are all sleep deprived and sick. One of our teammates' laptop had just up and died mid-dev session literally, and she's pushing her branch so she has to redo all her work on one of our laptops, forcing us to relocate to a space in the school library that's only open until 7 PM. It was around 5 PM at the time. A well-but teammate has the audacity to finally show back up in the Discord and ask, what do I have to do again, as if it's not all in the Discord in one nice and neat message and on our online Kanban board. The three of us managed to somehow get everything done, but another teammate and I missed the final project deadline for a different class and completely fail it. Stressed, not sleeping well, sick, got the dates wrong. We almost had it done, then hit a wall with a bug and just couldn't recover in time for the deadline, putting us at risk for not graduating on time even though both of us had jobs lined up that require we do graduate on time. This bee somehow misses her train 3 times, twice on Sunday and again on Monday, and arrives to our booth with nothing literally an hour before the expo starts. I literally have never been so annoyed and frustrated with another human being in my whole freaking life, oh my god. Then this hoe just goes off and graduates, leaving the three of us rattled and stressed and wondering if we'll even get the same luxury. Making a game. Russian GTA style top-down shooter. Made everything myself including music. Spend an entire weekend adding props, NPCs, destructible walls, several particle systems, map building etc. File corrupted, all 6 backups gone. About a year later I try again. Russian GTA 2.0 get even further than last time. Add cars that you can drive, different enemies, roads etc. Corrupts again. All backups gone. Moral of the story? Don't use a space in the project name in Game Maker 1.4. I only have a really early version of the game before I decided to turn it into Russian GTA, but I can't access the project file to build off it because it got corrupted. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.